Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a new edition of the Daily Debate. In tonight's show, we're going to be looking at Egypt's developmental projects and the Industrial Revolution, more like an industrial, sustainably, environmentally friendly industrial revolution. We're going to be looking at this sector and the government's efforts in this regard tonight on this show. But before we start doing that, let's check out some of the stories making the news today. And we'll start off with President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, whose ongoing efforts and the government's efforts to enhance the people with special needs to lead a normal daily lives. He reviewed today the efforts to localize prosthetics and disability equipment industry. This came during the President's meeting with Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli and a number of ministers and government officials. The head of state directed to establish an integrated industrial complex for producing artificial limbs and disability equipment in cooperation with experienced foreign companies which work in this field. President al-Sisi further instructed to expand efforts of all concerned authorities to prepare the state's utilities be ready to deal with people with special needs in accordance with world codes in this respect. The meeting tackled the state's efforts to put a comprehensive imagination to establish the industrial complex in accordance with the international medical and technological criteria. The industrial complex is set to host a number of specialized factories that produce artificial limbs and paralysis equipment, as well as wheelchairs, medical shoes, and silicone products. Foreign Minister Sameh Shukri, the appointed head of the UN Climate Change Conference COP27, took part in a high-level meeting of the Group of 77, which focused on damages drawn by climate change. Addressing the meeting, Shukri stressed that the harm done by climate change is a pivotal issue on the agenda of the global climate action. The top diplomat further said it is important to carefully deal with the issue during the upcoming COP27 conference in Sharm el-Sheikh. He also reviewed Caira's vision in this regard. And on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly meetings, Foreign Minister Shukri held a number of meetings. He held talks with the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken that centered on bilateral ties as well as a number of regional and international issues of mutual concern. The top diplomat also held a meeting with the US envoy to Yemen, Tim Linderking, at Egypt's UN Permanent Mission premises in New York. Also on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly meeting, Shukri held talks with the Cypriot Foreign Minister on Monday in New York. Foreign Ministry spokesman Ambassador Ahmed Abu Zaid said the meeting tackled bilateral ties and coordinating stances and international groupings, especially the UN. Shukri also held talks with France's Foreign Minister and India's Foreign Minister. Arab League Secretary General Ahmed Abul Ghait and the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres stressed on Tuesday the Palestinian issue is a cornerstone for stability and prosperity in the region. The Arab League issued a statement following the talks held on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly meeting in New York. The statement stressed the commitment by the two sides to continue coordination to reach political solutions to the crises in the Middle East and the whole world, atop of which the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Abul Ghait praised the UN for reaching a deal to allow Ukraine grain shipments to exit the country and be exported to world markets despite the war. He called for continuing the UN efforts to evade the looming global food crisis. These were some of the stories making the news today. We're now turning our attention to tonight's topic. Now, Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli was keen on the government's implementing technological infrastructure projects nationwide. Let's check out this report and we'll be right back.
Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli asserted the state's keenness on implementing projects of technological infrastructure nationwide and improving services through this vital sector. This came during Madbouli's meeting with Communications and Information Technology Minister Amr Talat to follow up on the implementation of a number of projects carried out by the Ministry of Communications and Information Technology. The Premier underlined the role of CIT sector in improving services provided for citizens in various domains by expanding the use of digital transformation system. During the meeting, Minister Talat discussed developing the electronic system design industry. The minister further noted that a strategy is being drawn by Egyptian electronics design pioneers to achieve several goals, topped by providing training for youth and benefiting from the extensive expertise of experts in this industry. He stressed that the MCIT is working on creating a conducive climate for companies working in the electronics design sector. Meanwhile, Minister of Planning and Economic Development Helal Said said the lion's share of investments is directed to real estate activity with a total of 157.9 billion Egyptian pounds, accounting for 53.7% of the total public investments in the sector. According to Minister Said, 103.4 billion Egyptian pounds and 32.9 billion Egyptian pounds are dedicated to water and sanitation as well as construction projects respectively. The minister noted that the government targets increasing the urban development sector production by 15.6% in fiscal year 2022-2023 to 33.9 billion Egyptian pounds and raising its share to the country's GDP by 16.3% to reach 19.5 billion Egyptian pounds, up from 16.8 billion Egyptian pounds in fiscal year 2021-2022. She explained that this objective was driven by the continued implementation of national mega projects and expansions in housing projects that the government implements.
مصر دايما لما تنوي قادرة تعمل معجزات في التاريخ دور تلاقي عنها مكتوبة حكايات بالعزيمة والإرادة كل يوم في إنجازات الحكاية في مصر فكر قالها نبني وقالنا عنبر
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and we're delighted to be joined here tonight in the studio by Dr. Tamer, Rady, Head of the Economics Department, the Faculty of Business at Ain Shams University, to shed more light on this file. Dr. Rady, thank you very much for joining us.
Always a pleasure being with you.
Dr. Rady, first off, now, we were talking, the government has spent hundreds of billions of pounds on developmental projects, mega national projects, worked on providing thousands of job opportunities for many years now. And this is only considered the first phase of an economic reform program that includes committing to the plan that we have agreed on with the International Monetary Fund, laying down the groundwork, the infrastructure work to help the Egyptian industries and the Egyptian producers and the Egyptian and foreign investors as well, trying to lure them in the Egyptian market. Now, how can you assess the amounts of money that's been spent, the hundreds of billions of pounds, and the kind of progress that we have achieved over the past few years? That's only just the first phase.
Well, to really assess it, you have to go all the way to what made the government take a decision of renovating and innovating and coming in to replace or build new roads, new bridges, new cities, new factories. What you need to remember is what the country went through starting 2011 with the January Revolution of 2011. What happened that year and the years that followed was a great deal of skepticism within the private investors, a great deal of uncertainty about the future. And then Egypt have witnessed its slowest ever GDP growth rates in recent histories. Even though, if you go back all the way to wars that Egypt had, it never had such a low 1.8% growth rate as in 2011, 2012. And somebody had to do something about it. Now, the textbooks of any macroeconomics text would tell you governments has a role, and governments would have to invest. Usually, the best thing that governments invest in is infrastructure. Construction, infrastructure lasts, is an invitation for investment later on, but it has the ability to inject into the market the many job opportunities required. Because when it comes to construction, you're talking about cement, plastic, electrical equipment, you name it. Every type of good. So it renovates and gives life to different types of industries. And that's exactly what happened. Now, think about building 7,500 kilometers new of roads. That's equivalent to what Egypt had prior to starting doing that. So you have built a number of roads. That's equivalent to what you already had. You have connected different major cities. And then you came and started looking at sanitation. So let's build recycling rates with sewages, lining of the canals to save some water. All those major projects do not just serve the one and only important at that time purpose of generating employment, which it definitely did, but it also builds infrastructure and a capital formation required for further private investment to thrive. And it holds the opportunity and creates the incentive for foreign direct investment. You're providing infrastructure. You look at electricity generating. Egypt had a problem in 2011, 2012. Now you are actually exporting electricity to neighboring countries, and maybe you have seen in the news a few days ago, you are actually signed a deal with Greece for a massive amount of electricity exporting generated by environmentally friendly generators. So that transformation, what did it do? Well, in 2013, 2014, early 2013, 2014, our unemployment rate almost reached 14%,
Yes.
the highest ever in our history in Egypt. Today, you're looking at 7.2%, the lowest ever. So the very first thing that you would answer to anybody who would doubt the infrastructure investment is, excuse me, look at the unemployment figures. Now, when all is done, and years would go by, Egypt is going to be living with the new infrastructure, with the new roads, with major highways connecting different cities, and with new ports. And that's an infrastructure which is incredibly important to invest in particular at that one time in which private investment was very skeptical of the future.
Dr. Rady, we're going to delve into the details of this sort of development. We're going to talk about the financial aspect of it as well. But let me take it one step at a time. I mean, if this is the first phase, and the second phase is basically building on what happened, the infrastructure, the groundwork, creating a good fertile soil for a foreign investor to come and invest their money. Now, when are we going to see an influx of foreign investors coming to Egypt in a time that we're actually seeing not just Egypt suffering from an economic difficulty, but the whole world, all countries, every day they're talking about getting into an economic recession, be it the United Kingdom or Germany or other countries around the world as a result of the Ukraine-Russia conflict. Previously it was the coronavirus, and who knows what will happen later on. Also, let's add climate change to the formula. So when can we see foreign investors actually come and invest in Egypt and start really operating the economic industrial zones for the Suez Canal, for instance, and kickstart that second phase?
Well, you're starting to see right now an influx of investments coming from the Gulf area, which is very understanding from the Gulf area for the nature of what Egypt is going through when it comes to development. It reflects confidence in what's going to happen in Egypt in the future, and it reflects, of course, the good opportunities such investments do. Now, you want to go further than that. You want to say, well, when we are going to see American, Chinese, European, and well, of course, as you just mentioned, the whole world is suffering. And at times of great suffering, because of Corona, because of the war in Ukraine, because of the supply logistics, the chain hiccups that it has been having since the end of Corona with the increase in demand, you've got all the bad elements coming together. You've got the pandemic and the war.
Yes.
And the excess demand of people that thought Corona was over, so let's start working again. All of that is going to take some time. It's going to take 2-3 years, 1.5, 2 years, and the shorter it would be, the better, of course. But nobody can tell you for sure, except that when it is over, you have a country that's ready to host foreign direct investment. And that's what really counts. It's like, you know, there have been times in which tourism in Egypt went low. At those days, smart hotel owners started renovating because they knew that one day it's coming back. And hopefully it will be very soon, because the environment now is supporting it heavily, not by promises, but by actions on the ground. And those actions on the ground come in the form of, whether it is in policy and economic reform, a commitment to the private sector and to foreign direct investors and local investors as well. And it also comes with work on the ground of new ports, new roads, new airports, new cities, and new tech, high-tech investment as well. Those are all the main components of a recipe designed to attract foreign direct investment. So you can rest assured, it might take a year or two before you see the influx coming. It is definitely related to what's happening in the rest of the world, and once the rest of the world starts recovering, developing nations in a good positions like Egypt nowadays is going to see the benefit of all what she invested in of infrastructure.
Well, when we talk about the developing the industrial sector and all sectors now, well, the name of the game is the environmentally friendly and a green economy, and talking about the sustainability of things, really depending on renewable energy resources as well. Now, with all the development that has been taking place. Now, do we have to change or readapt to a more sustainably, environmentally friendly industries? Is it easy for the Egyptian industries to transform or the whole way they do the business to a green and environmentally friendly, sustainable way?
Well, that transformation is somehow obligatory, out of so many different reasons. Of course, there is an Egypt forecast and a strategic look for how Egypt should look like in 2030. And the environmental part is the main element of that part.
Yes.
Second, you are a part of the world. The social responsibility as a citizen, as a company, and as a nation would require all participants, not just in Egypt, but all over the world, to commit to a globally cleaner environment, to lessen global warming, because you are the first that's going to suffer as a developing nation. But then comes the trade-offs that you are smiling about right now. The trade-off, of course, is always heavy. But luckily, technological advantages and the sort of look to the future now is you can achieve both. That is, you can achieve economic growth while going green. Maybe one of the best evidence of that is what I just mentioned a few minutes ago. Egypt signed a deal to export electricity generated by wind turbines to Greece.
Yes.
So then you can actually find a business that is profitable, that is clean, and that's increasing your exports. Egypt have went into recycling and water conservation, for example, by lining 4,000 kilometers of canals, agricultural canals. That lining up of 4,000 kilometers is going to save a lot of water. That's environmentally friendly, that's correct, and that's very economically efficient because you need water. So then you can find a host of economic activities that can create jobs, that can create exports. At the same time, you're going green. The old debate has been always, well, we are a developing nation, we have the right to pollute. Well, let's increase our footprint. As you grow in the developing world, it's our right to grow, and let's contaminate the environment for a little bit. But that is outdated now.
Yes.
Everybody shares the responsibility. We all have to go green. One of the very good things that you can sense in the streets of Cairo now, especially among university students, is that environmental awareness has increased exponentially. The government efforts in that regard has been enormous. So you see a lot of recycling waste projects. You see a lot of patents by students and research centers in the area of going green. And I think awareness has a great deal to do with the success of that strategy.
Yes. Well, speaking of the green industries, now we see a lot of the governmental agreements with countries like India, for instance, working on establishing and building factories, producing green hydrogen, green ammonia. Now, it seems that the government is taking the lead in really working on producing green energy, literally. Now, do you feel that the private sector can follow suit? Do they have the guts to actually embark on a sector that maybe not a lot of the private sector companies are used to embark on?
Yes, I definitely do, especially young entrepreneurs who have the ideas and who feel the commitment to a cleaner environment. I've witnessed the startups of so many little projects here and there. I can name a few ideas, for example. Some young people came in and said, can't use plastic for bottles anymore. So we'll start glass. And you start seeing it on the shelves in supermarkets. And if you're environmentally friendly and you believe in that, you have an incentive to buy it. And it's just the same cost. Anyways. So similarly, there are plenty of ideas, especially by young entrepreneurs, that is going into that direction. And there is a sense that young entrepreneurs have enough awareness and enough social responsibility, but also enough business smartness in which they also see in it profitability, which is really good.
Yes. Well, we're a country of over 100 million citizens. Do you feel that the startups or the entrepreneurs, and having these little small first steps, if we may call them that, would be able to cover in time 100 million citizens to at least achieve a proper sustainable development goal by 2030, or a climate goals that would be achieved by 2050?
We have set the standards really high in Egypt's 2030 strategy or look. Some people would say, well, this is very challenging when you have such a high benchmark to reach to, but the government is slowly working on it. Things like that do take time. But if you consider when it comes to small and medium enterprises, that they are definitely a pillar for development. And the government and most of the economists all over the world look at developing nations now and point to, you always have to involve, enlarge small and medium enterprises.
Yes.
Certainly the government has given up loans. I think it was over 40 billion within the last 3-4 years to small and medium industries.
Yes.
And a portion of that, smaller portion, has been going to green projects, which is a plus here. It makes us hopeful.
Yes. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Egypt is investing about 225 billion pounds in projects related to sustainable development, a serious amount of money that is attached to a serious goal Egypt is trying to achieve. Let's check out this report and we'll be right back.
Minister of Local Development Hisham Amna said Egypt had implemented projects worth 225 billion Egyptian pounds to support sustainable development and infrastructure benefiting 38 million people and providing 7.5 million job opportunities. According to a statement by his ministry, these projects are mainly in the fields of road paving, electricity, lighting, improving the environment, security, firefighting and traffic management. Minister Amna asserted that the ministry's strategy to improve the environment and confront effects of climate change focuses on several fronts, the most important of which are sustainable development, developing solid waste management, and supporting youth and community initiatives that address climate change. The minister further said that his ministry wants to invest 34 billion pounds to support infrastructure needed for managing solid water, improving air quality and preserving the environment. Of that investment, 12 billion Egyptian pounds will be allocated for landfills and waste recycling. He noted that his ministry's plan includes closing certain landfills, establishing sanitary burial of solid wastes and recycling and treatment lines, highlighting that 45 billion people will benefit from the development of waste management. Moreover, Amna said the ministry is committed to taking into account environmental dimensions in implementing development projects coinciding with the country's preparations to host UN conference on climate change in Sharm el-Sheikh this November. He stated that the ministry is focusing on programs related to reducing carbon emissions, stimulating green growth, supporting environmentally and socially responsible investment, and maximizing the value of green investments, adding that his ministry also seeks to adopt institutional and strategic mechanisms for confronting climate change and curbing its repercussions. According to the Minister of Local Development Fund and your project program earmarked 173.5 million pounds for promoting heritage handicrafts that has benefited 23 million people. These programs are meant to promote the transition towards a green economy and providing financing to achieve sustainable development goals by providing loans to finance micro, small and medium enterprises and supporting heritage, environmental and handicrafts.
Well, Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, continuing our discussion with Dr. Rady. Now, Doctor, this seems to be one of the most important issues of any sort of projects, industries, development. Being environmentally friendly also costs a lot of money. Now, the financing aspect of all these projects, hundreds of billions of pounds, hundreds of billions of dollars are being spent and still need to be spent along the way. We are about 50 days or less from the COP27, which is combating climate change. It's all about climate action, that Egypt has obligations to, not just for Egypt, but the rest of the African continent as well. We need to make sure we get enough financing, that the pledges, turning the pledges into implementation from the COP27 26 in Glasgow. But also we have the issue of sustainable development that also needs a lot of financing. Now, you've mentioned that the Gulf countries are investing. What about Europe? What about the developed countries, the countries that pledged $100 billion every year for the developing countries that have not been invested yet? Now, the whole world is suffering from economic recessions. The whole world is being affected by the Russia-Ukraine conflict. How can we do that? How can we ensure financing for green energy, climate action, sustainable development through the COP27 that is coming up in November?
Well, let's segment this question into smaller portions. Let's take the finances, for example. For the 7,500 new kilometers of roads that were built. When you calculate the cost of building those roads in economic terms, what you calculate in is actually what we refer to as the social cost and the social benefit. So the social cost in here is you are directing funds away from other things. So you did not build another factory, you did not build a hospital, you did not build, for example, a university. You chose to put the money in 7,500 roads because it's urgent to do that. And it cost you, for example, 700 billion. Well, yes, but if you know that studies show that in Cairo, prior to those roads, each year you lose almost $4 billion worth of extra fuel. With the carbon footprint that lives in Cairo, for example. That's just Cairo alone, not all of Egypt. And I would ask you now, how much do you feel you have saved on commuting time, coming to work and going back home? And the common answer would be, for people living in Cairo, well, you know, on average, everybody is witnessing to a 30% to a 50% reduction in commuting time. The British public broadcast, somewhere around 10 years ago or so, I was watching the news and they said, you know, if you live in Cairo, you can only take one business appointment per day. Because if you leave, we're not sure if you're coming back to work. That doesn't happen anymore. So when you look at the social benefit in terms of fuel saved, carbon footprint lessened, time saved, and you calculate that, you'll find that 700 billion for the roads would easily come back as any other project in other forms of reduction of economic inefficiencies. And that would come within 7 to 8 years. So that's a project that is actually incredibly profitable. And if you add to that social benefit the ease of doing business and the connections between large cities and different ports, that generates more trade in the future and attracts more foreign direct investment, then it becomes a very viable investment and highly profitable. Now that's on one part. On the second part, well, that one had a bit of environmental agenda. It reduced and lessened the carbon footprint. But then when you look at the international community, you are doing COP27 in the very first of your priorities is exchanging ideas. What comes second is, well, you have pledges from donor countries. And hopefully, when people see that you are such highly committed in different areas, and you are not talking, you are implementing on the floor. So you are producing the hydrogen, you are producing wind turbines, you have built the largest in the Middle East solar panel, solar generating company, a production facility in Bamban, in Aswan.
Yes.
So when this is this commitment, I think it encourages a lot of such donors to jointly invest with you. If not jointly or donate, for example, but jointly invest in a profitable thing that can be re-exported or can be sold in the local market. So you have a great potential in that area. And we take steps that are incremental, that might look relatively slow, even though the last 2-3 years have proven that we have taken incredibly large steps. But when it comes to attracting the foreign direct investment, take a deep breath and wait. It is going to gradually come. Once the world is going back to its normal pace of economic life, showing that slight vision and hope of recovery, and the influx of foreign direct investment is going to come back. And a large portion, I would believe, it would be directed to sustainable projects.
Do you think, Dr. Rady, that this could be our strongest bargaining chip, the renewable energy, the solar energy, the wind energy that we're generating in Roslev as well, the electrical power plants now exporting electricity, the liquefaction of natural gas at a time where the whole of Europe is actually suffering and trying to broker deals with neighboring countries to get more energy and really cushion their needs for the winter season?
One of the competitive advantages of the Egyptian economy lies in natural gas, of course, and in the availability of the liquidation facilities, which have proven to be incredibly important, that countries like Israel thought that they would jointly cooperate, in which they would export the gas, we would liquefy it and provide it to Europe via special pipes and some newly constructed pipes as well. On the other hand side, the Egyptian weather and the climate, whether it comes to wind turbines, whether it comes to solar panels, prove incredibly attractive to produce such types of energy. But on the other hand side, you have a lot of competitive advantages as well. You still have relatively cheaper labor than the rest of the world. You have a geographic location that is incredibly attractive, joining West and East. You have a Suez Canal that now is much faster with 2 lanes coming and going, saving a whole lot of time, and the ability to invest along the side of the canal from the point of entry to the point of exit can serve as a major hub and a major investment opportunity for a lot of interested nations. So you have a lot of different competitive advantages, and the idea is how to play with them all at the same time and maximize the use of each.
Yes. Dr. Rady, now, quite recently, Egypt has suffered a big steep of inflation. And it's not just Egypt, but the whole world. Every country, every other day, they're declaring that they are entering a new phase of economic recession. However, the Egyptian citizen really feels it as well. You've mentioned the unemployment rates that went down, the GDPs, the Egyptian GDP's performance that has been really quite remarkable over the past few years. But now every citizen is feeling the heat and the burn of higher prices, big inflation. Everybody is worried about that, the devaluation of the Egyptian pound. Now, how optimistic or how long can the Egyptian citizen swallow this pill, this hard pill? And you've actually mentioned that it's a good thing for the macro economy of Egypt. So can you please shed light on that?
Well, the biggest problem facing the whole world right now is inflation. And the reasons for inflation, there are plenty of reasons. The biggest one would probably be the Ukrainian-Russian war. And then the excess demand with the supply chain problems that happened at the end of the coronavirus. Add both of those together and you end up with a global crisis, global economic crisis, pushing the prices up. To combat inflation, developed nations, United States, rest of Europe, are hiking up their interest rates, which puts a further pressure on the dollar in Egypt, in the foreign currencies, and the rest of the developing nations as well. One of them, of course, is Egypt. So when you look at that problem, it is a completely imported problem. And you have to face it like you have faced other problems in the past. When we try to make conclusions about what's going on today, we will go back to the history. With every Egyptian devaluation came economic growth within a year or two after. If you look at 2016 and you look at 2018 and 19, well, we were growing at 2016 by 4.5%. 2018 and 2019, you actually went up to 5.6%. You have a huge public debt? Yes, we did. And it exceeded at a point 100% of GDP. But you managed that, lowered it back to 87, and the economy was growing. Then came an imported problem from outside. So what you need to do is a very disciplined monetary policy. You will eventually devaluate furthermore, not by large, but you would make it more flexible to encourage everybody to invest, and all the remittances coming from abroad to keep on coming. And with that devaluation, with that monetary reform, you are probably going to witness more economic growth, just like it happened in the past. So it is a period, and it is a tough period, and it is an incredibly annoying one when it comes to how sluggish the economy is and the effect of inflation, especially for people that work in the importing business. So car manufacturers, factories, everybody's going to suffer in the short term. The most important part is to reassure everybody. We have witnessed that before. Nothing has changed. Same kind of problem coming from abroad. We faced it. 2-3 years have passed, and we went back stronger. The most important part is to make people convinced via numbers, via being incredibly transparent. The sources of the problem is coming from outside. There's no wrongdoing in here. And when all is over, you're going to be left up with all the bridges and roads and ports and new cities and new capital. That transitory period would require solidarity and a great deal of understanding so that everybody can go through it and pass it peacefully. And it will pass. And when you want to draw some conclusions or to make yourself feel a little bit better, you can look at countries like Lebanon in the region, in which electricity is served about 4 hours a day, and you would be lucky. If it reaches 4 hours a day. You would look at inflation in other parts of the world, and you would remember, well, we have a 15%, 16%, but a few years ago, we had a transitory period in which inflation was 25%. Inflation in developing nations is a roller coaster. When you look at the trend, some years it's incredibly high, some years it's incredibly low. When you look at a developed nation, that fluctuation is very narrow. The United States, when it reaches 9 and 10%, they went to war over the Gulf and in Iran to secure the pipelines in the 70s. And but a whole foreign policy directed towards securing oil because of the inflationary pressure it does on the economy. But we are talking about bandwidths of 2 to 10. Over here in developing nations, you talk about 8 to 25. So that band we have witnessed before. Transitory period, tough period, yes. Global, yes. It is not a country specific, it is global.
Yes.
And it is solvable, just like any other economic problem. We remain hopeful. A couple of years, everything would go back to normal.
Yes. Well, ladies and gentlemen, obviously the government has spent and is still spending hundreds of billions of pounds over development projects, industrial projects, green and sustainably friendly and developmental industries and sector here in Egypt. And as Dr. Rady said, a price hike or an economic recession, it's a global issue, not an Egyptian one. Everyone's being affected by it. It's not out of wrongdoing from domestically. And what it needs is solidarity. That's basically it. Ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this edition of the Daily Debate. But before we go, I'd like to thank my very distinguished guest, Dr. Tamer, Rady, Head of the Economic Department at the Faculty of Business, Ain Shams University. Dr. Rady, always a pleasure having you with us on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, please stay tuned for more coming up on Nile International. I'm Henny Saif. Thank you for joining us.